Hi and welcome to today's lesson. It's lesson 5 in the GCSE preparation course and it's on quadratic equations. While we're waiting for a few more people to log in, have a go at these starter questions. So can you find pairs of numbers which have the following sums and products? I've done the first one for you, so remember sum is what two numbers add up to and product is the answer you get when you multiply the two numbers. So for that first one, the numbers would have been 2 and 3 because their sum is 5 and their product is 6. Okay, so to get you warming up for the skills we're going to need for quadratics, see if you can get some of the others. Skip to some negative ones if you're quite confident on this, as they get more challenging further down. You may have realised this session is slightly different today. I'm not actually recording this live. But it is streamed, it's currently on Facebook and YouTube, so you can watch on either. And if you have any questions, do put them in the chat box, as I will be live watching this and able to comment on the chat box to help you. So I've still got that live element of interactivity, it's just I didn't want the internet getting in the way and it was causing a few issues the week before last. So without any further ado, I'll leave you a few minutes to have a go at those starter questions. Hi to those just joining us. We're just having a go at these starter questions before we get started. If you've got any questions at any point, just type them in the chat box and I'll answer you as we go. If you're on YouTube, you can pause this as you want to and take more time over the questions. If you're on Facebook, it's like you're watching it live. You can't pause it, but you will be able to after the session has ended. You can go back and review it in your own time. Alright, just one more minute on these questions. Just a reminder, you can print these out in advance from my website, which is at the bottom of these slides, mrsk'slightbulbmoments.wordpress.com, and you'll find all the slides that you need ready so you can start answering questions if you take a bit longer with them or if you want to do them in your own time and print them out before the session. Okay, let's have some answers. I'm going to put them up on the screen, see how well you did. There we go. The negatives have to be on the right numbers. So if we look at question 4 there, it's got to be -5 and +6. If it was -6 and we added 5, we would end up with a sum of -1. Not a sum of +1. So always, once you found your numbers, double check they work for both the sum and the product. Okay, hopefully you've managed to mark some of them. Again, go back after the session, have a look through if you wanted to check a few more of them. So today we're going to be looking at quadratic equations and I'll go through the kind of detail we're going to be looking at. There's so much to do with quadratics that I couldn't possibly do it in one half-an-hour session. So today we're going to be focusing on factorising basic quadratics, the difference of two squares, factorising more challenging quadratics where the number at the beginning is not just like 1x squared, it could be 2x squared, 3x squared and so on, and solving quadratics. So we're going to be cramming quite a bit in today, but there's some of our basic skills we need to be able to do with quadratic equations. In the future, in another session, we're going to be doing completing the square, using the quadratic formula, graphs of quadratics, and applied quadratics, so quadratic inequalities, quadratic sequences, simultaneous equations with quadratics, and so on. There's a lot of content to do with quadratics, so this is just a bit of a recap, bit of an introduction. Okay, let's crack on. So first thing first, factorising quadratics with one x squared term. So if you see these two examples, they've both got just one x squared right at the beginning there. This is your most simple kind. So when we've got these ones, we look at the middle term. So that's the coefficient in front of the x, and that's our sum, just like the starter questions here. And the last number, that just coefficient on its own, the plus 6, is our product. So we've got to find two numbers which add to make 5 and multiply to make 6. So hopefully that starter was a bit of a recap for you. Those numbers are going to be 2 and 3 because they add to make 5, multiply to make 6. Now how we write this with these basic ones is just in two brackets. We know we've got an x at the beginning of both of our brackets because when I expand them that will give me my x squared. And we've just found that that number after the x is a positive 2 and a positive 3 because we've chosen the numbers 2 and 3. So just to recap, you choose two numbers which have a sum to get that middle number, the plus 5, and a product that gives you the last number, the plus 6. Pop them in brackets like this, and then you can always check, and I would recommend doing this in an exam situation, always check your answer nice and quickly. And you can do this by expanding, because factorising and expanding are the opposites, they'll take you back to one another. So x times x gives you x squared, x times 3 is 3x, 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 3 is 6. Collect those two together and we get x squared plus 5x plus 6, which was what we started with. So you know you've done it correct. Okay, I'm going to go through one more here with some negatives. So if we have a look at this second example. So I've got to find two numbers which have a sum of minus 2 and a product of minus 48. Now it's slightly more challenging when the numbers get bigger at the end there, trying to find two numbers which go into it. Some of you might have spotted this already, then fab. But if you can't spot it immediately, I'm going to show you a way where you'll be able to find it. It takes a little bit of time, but if you're in that mind block situation and you just can't think, this will get you the numbers. Always start with this product, so that's the number right at the end, the minus 48, and start listing your factor pairs. So I could have been 1 and 48, because they multiplied together to make 48. Could have been 2 and 24. Could have been 3 and 16, that makes 48. And what I'm trying to see at the moment is if any of these are likely to give us a sum of minus 2. So that means these numbers have got to be 2 apart. Okay, these numbers are a lot more apart. 1 and 48 is 47 numbers apart. So we've got to find two numbers which are just 2 apart. 4 goes into this and it goes into it 12 times. Getting closer. 5 doesn't go into 48. 6, I'm thinking, does 6 go? Yes, because I know that 7 6s are 42, so 8 6s must be 48. It depends which numbers you know from your timetables and you can work the rest out. So it goes into 6 8 times. Oh look, those are 2 apart. So we've actually just found our pair. Now which one of those will have to be negative for me to get a sum of minus 2? Can you see it's got to be the 8? It's going to have to be a minus 8. Because if I've got minus 8 and then I add 6, I'm still on minus 2. Whereas if I had minus 6 and added 8, it would pop into the positives, plus 2. So we put that into our brackets as x plus 6 and x minus 8. It doesn't matter which way round your brackets are. You could have written x minus 8 first and then x plus 6, but the negative symbol must be on the 8 and the 8 only. If they were both negative, it would also give us a positive product at the end there. That would be a positive 48. So because the product is negative, you know one of them is going to be negative. Okay, you could do the check there. I'm not going to do that on this bit because I've shown you how to do that. But this one, the important skill is knowing those factor pairs. If you start at the beginning with 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, you'll always find the numbers eventually. Okay, your go now then. So you have a go at these two practice questions. Right, should we see how we've got on? So you should have with yours two numbers which add to make 9 and multiply to make 20. That's going to be 4 and 5. So our answer is x plus 4 and x plus 5. Remember the brackets could be the other way around, not a problem. Our second one, two numbers which add to make 5 and multiply to make minus 14. Now straight away with the product of 14, I'm thinking 2 and 7, and they are going to make 5 in some way. One of them's got to be negative. That's going to be the negative 2. So we get x minus 2 and x plus 7. And always just check, if you struggle with finding those negatives, just guess one to start with. So think, is it the 2 that's negative? Think minus 2 plus 7, do I end up on positive 5? And if you got it the wrong way round, then just swap it. There's only 2 options to choose from there. Okie dokie. Let's make this slightly more challenging then. So we're going to look at the difference of two squares. This is actually one that lots of people don't spot in questions, and then it leads them to get confused or spend a lot of time doing the question in a different way. But if you can spot this, it's really, really quick to do. So the way to spot a difference of two squares is we've got two square terms with a negative between. Just turn my pen off. So with these ones, you can see that we've got a negative symbol or a subtract right in the middle, and that's the difference of two squares. Okay, and then we've got two squares. We've got x squared, and so we've got x squared there, and then 9 is actually 3 squared. Okay, x squared and 3 squared. Here we've got a square term and a square term. I'm going to go through how to do those ones, so I'm not going to give you spoilers for the last one. Right, let's have a look at those two in a bit more depth then. So these are the exact same questions I just had on the previous slide. What we've got to do to find the bracket is we've got to square root each term. So if we square root x squared, we get just an x. And if I square root 9, I get 3. That doesn't mean my answer is just x minus 3. You can't square root terms that have been added or subtracted just individually. But what we can do is put it straight into brackets. Remember, to get my x squared at the beginning, I must have an x and an x. And that's because the x squared, the square root of it, is x. Now to get my second term, I had my number 3 there, because the square root of 9 was 3. So we pop a 3 in here and there. Oops. And then it's a subtract and a plus. And it doesn't matter which way round you get them, they just have to be different. So 1 subtract, 1 plus. Now that's because when we now expand this, so let's do our little check, we get x squared plus 3x minus 3x minus 9. Minus 3 times 3 is minus 9. Can you see that plus 3x and minus 3x are just going to cancel out? So we end up with x squared minus 9, which was our question. So giving the brackets exactly the same terms, an x and a 3, an x and a 3, but opposite signs, one's a minus, one's a plus, means that middle term cancels out, and we're just left with the x squared and the 9, which is what we wanted from the question. Okay, I'll go through one more of those type of questions with slightly trickier numbers. So remember, we've got a square root each term, and we're going to put them into brackets like this. Now the square root of 4a squared. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. The square root of a squared is a. So that means the square root is 2a. Because if I had 2a times 2a, I would get 4a squared. Then I want the square root of my 25. The square root of 25 is 5. So I can just put a 5 at the beginning and the end, or both brackets. And then we just need to give 1 a plus and 1 a minus. Really doesn't matter which way around. If you checked that, you would get back to 4a squared minus 25 after the expanding. Okay, so it's just the square root of each term with a plus and a minus in the different brackets. Have a go and see how you do. You've got a simpler one to start with and then a slightly more challenging one. Okay, should we see how we've done? So for this first one, we should have x plus 6 and x minus 6. Okay, square root of x squared is x, square root of 36 is 6, one with a plus, one with a minus. Doesn't matter if you wrote it the other way around. For this next one, we should have 4b plus 1 and 4b minus 1, because the square root of 16b squared is just 4b, and the square root of 1 is 1. Okay, any root of 1 is just going to be 1. I hope we're happy with that. So that's spotting basic difference of two squares. And if you can just spot them in a question, see there's square numbers popping up, all with a negative symbol between them, then it's a really quick answer to give. Okay, should we try our next little topic? We're going to move on to factorising quadratics where a does not equal 1. So if you look at these two examples, the first one we've got 2x squared plus 9x plus 4, and the second one 3x squared minus 14x plus 15. So the important bit is that first term isn't just an x squared. So if you remember earlier on when we just did find the sum of the middle number, the product of the last number, that was for basic ones, we didn't have a number right at the front. This method is slightly trickier. Now I'm going to say before I start going through my example, there are lots of different methods for this. So if your school has taught you one method and you think you're actually quite confident with that, you just need a bit more practice, then maybe ask a teacher at your school if they can either help you with it or point you to a video that goes through it that method. But this method is the one that I use and find most simple, but it's completely up to you. Okay, I'm going to explain it and see how we go. So, with this first question, it's a little bit trickier, and apologies in advance for my stylus work here because it does get a little bit messy. There's a lot on the page, but I hope you can follow. So, because we've got this 2 at the beginning, we've actually got to multiply that by our last number. So our 2 we times by the 4 and we get 8. That now means our sum is still 9, but our product that we've got to find is actually now 8. Okay, not 4 as it would have been if this was just a basic one. So we've got to find two numbers with a sum of 9 and a product of 8. Now these ones, a lot of people often forget this, it's just 1 and 8. So remember, it can be 1 and the number. 1 times 8 is 8, 1 plus 8 is 9. So we've done that first bit, which is to multiply the first and last numbers to get the product. Next, we've got to split the middle coefficient, so that's that 9x, into the two numbers we've found. So I'm going to rewrite the equation. I'm going to rewrite it as 2x squared, and then we've got the numbers we've found are the 9 and the 8. Sorry, no, they're not. they're the 8, we found 1 and 8. Because they give the product of 8 and the sum of 9. So our two numbers we found are 1 and 8. So rather than adding 9x, we are going to add 1x, or just x, and we're going to add 8x, before then continuing with the equation plus 4. So you'll see I've just rewritten the first equation. 2x squared has stayed as 2x squared. The 9x in the middle we've broken up into plus x, then plus 8x. It's the same thing as adding 9x, we've just split it into those two numbers we found, the 1 and the 8. At the end, the important bit, we've still written plus 4. We don't write that 8 we found for the product, that's just in our heads to help us find the two numbers. So that's your first bit, splitting it up. Now we have to cut this in half and factorise the left-hand side. So I'm just going to tick that in green so you can see what we've done there. So now we're onto this blue bubble here, factorise the left-hand side. So I'm going to cut it in half here. Now what can I take out of 2x squared and x? We can only take out x. So we take that out of our brackets and we work out what we've got left. X times 2x will give me 2x squared, and x times 1, and that's a positive 1, will give me x. You can double check that if you need to. X times 2x gives you 2x squared, x times 1 gives you plus x. Okay, so we've done that bit there. Then we need to do this second bit down here. Write the exact same bracket on the right hand side. So that's this bracket here. So I'm going to write down 2x plus 1. And you'll see I've left space in front of it, because we need to work out what coefficient needs to go in front of it. So see above that 2x plus 1, we've got 8x plus 4. So what needs to go in front of my bracket to give me 8x plus 4? I need a 4. Because 4 lots of 2x is 8x and 4 lots of 1 is 4. Alright? I know it's a little bit tricky, but follow me and hopefully you'll get some practice. Now we've got everything we need to just write our answer. So our first bracket is going to have the contents in the bracket from above. So that's our 2x plus 1. Okay, we had that bracket and that bracket were the same, they've gone in there. Our second bracket is going to have the content that's extra. We're going to have the x and the 4. So that's this x from the first one and this 4 from there. And that's your final answer, 2x plus 1 and x plus 4. You can write that the other way around, so you could have had x plus 4 and 2x plus 1. But that is your final answer, and you can always remember, expand it to check, and it should get you right back to the question, 2x squared plus 9x plus 4. You have a go at one, and I will go through it in a second. So you have a go at this first, see if you can follow along with my method there. So first off, multiply that 3 by the 15 and so on. Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, how are we getting on? Nearly there? Right, I'm going to go through this one and see how we've done. So, same process. I can do this all just in the one colour so you can see what I'm doing. Firstly, 3 times 15 gives us 45. So we've got to think of two numbers which multiply to give 45 and add to give minus 14. It's a little bit of a tricky one, but because we've got a negative in there, but we've got a positive product, that means they're both negative because they multiply out to give a positive number. My numbers are therefore going to be minus 9 and minus 5. Because minus 9, take away another 5, gets you all the way down to minus 14, the sum. And minus 9 times minus 5 gives you positive 45. Okay? So now we're going to rewrite the equation at the top, starting with our 3x squared. But we're going to split that middle term, the minus 14x, into minus 9x and minus 5x, keeping the plus 15 at the end. Okay, so hopefully we got that rewritten. Then the next step was to split it in half. So cut it in half and just focus on those two left-hand terms. Now you might have written out your minus 5x first and your minus 9x second. Absolutely fine. You'll have a slightly different method at this step, but your answer will be the same. It might just be your bracket is the other way around. But it really doesn't matter. It just might look a bit different. So I'm going to factorise out and I'm going to take 3x out of my bracket. Now I have to times that by x to get 3x squared and by minus 3 to get minus 9x. And check that in your head. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times minus 3 is minus 9x. Alright, we've done that left hand side. Now we copy over that exact same bracket, x minus 3 to this side. It's important you do it that way. Don't just look at the top bit and try and factorise it, because you'll very often make a little negative error. It's got to be that exact same bracket, x minus 3. Now what needs to go in front of that to get minus 5x plus 15? We've actually got to multiply that bracket by minus 5, because minus 5 times x gives you minus 5x, and minus 5 times minus 3 will give you positive 15. So just be really careful with your negatives there. Alright, now we've got our final answer, we've just got to write it out. The first bracket is the one that's the same, just the x minus 3 from both of those brackets. And the second one is those extras. So we've got that 3x from in front of the first bracket, and then we've got the minus 5 from in front of the second bracket. And if you expand that out, you would get back to the question. Okay, so just a reminder, you could have written that the other way around, 3x minus 5, then your x minus 3. And your method might look slightly different. Okay, and as I said, if you don't follow that method, do not worry, there are other methods out there. Try looking up another video of one or ask your teacher to recommend what they used or what you might have been taught if it was different. Alright, shall we look at the last part that we've got to learn today? Let's have a go. So this is solving quadratics. So can you notice what's different about these examples? These ones have an equals sign. The other ones didn't, they were just the first bit, x squared plus 5x plus 6. But these have an equals sign. They have to equal 0 for us to solve them, but the question might not start as that. If you look at that second example, we've got it equaling minus 4. So sometimes we have to do a bit of rearranging first. And I'm going to show you both methods. Okay, let's have a go. I'm going to take you through 3 examples here. These ones have already been factorised. So you haven't been given the equation, you've been given the brackets like we've done before. So all the hard work bit has been done for you. We've just got to work out how to solve it. Now what this means is something, so whatever is in this bracket, times whatever is in this bracket, because they're right next to each other, something times something should equal 0. Now the only possible way to get 0 from a multiplication is if one of those is 0. Yeah, 0 times 8, 0. 0 times 100, 0. So one of those brackets has to be 0. Now if x plus 1 equals 0, can you see that if I take away 1 from both sides, x must be minus 1. And if x minus 5 equals 0, I'd have to add 5 to both sides, and I would get x equals 5. So I have two answers here. I have x equals minus 1 or x equals 5. Both of them would work. Now you don't have to do that rearranging the equation every time. Can you just spot that in this first bracket we had a plus 1, and that means one of our answers is minus 1. In the second bracket we had a minus 5, and that means one of our answers is positive 5. That only works if it's a simple one. We've just got x's at the beginning, not 2x, not 3x. So it's only for very basic ones, but you can just flip the sign. Really nice and easy. So let's have a look at this second one then, and let's just use that cheats method. We've got a plus 4 in our bracket, so that means one of the answers must be minus 4. And then we've got a minus 4, so one of our answers must be positive 4. Okay, it's as simple as that. That's as long as it equals 0, so it must equal 0 for us to be able to do that, and it must have just one x at the beginning. Nice cheats method. You'll see we've got a slightly trickier one here. Part of it is the same. So if you look at this second bracket, that means x must equal 1 as one of our options, because it's a simple bracket there, just 1x, and I'm just going to flip the sign. This bracket is slightly different. I'm just going to show you with the equation how it works, then we'll look at the cheats method. So here, 3x plus 4 could equal 0. So let's think about solving that. Let's take away 4 from both sides. That means 3x equals minus 4. Now to get just 1x, I'd have to divide by 3. So 3x equals minus 4 over 3. Sorry, x equals minus 4 over 3. So those are your two answers, x equals 1 and x equals minus 4 over 3. You don't need to write it out as an equation though and solve it. You can do a little cheats method. If you see, we've got a plus 4 in our question, so looking at that complicated bracket. So that means we've got a minus 4 in our answer, just like before. But because there were 3 x's, I've got to divide my answer by 3. So that's why our answer is minus 4 over 3. So it's not actually that much more difficult. It's exactly the same as before. If it was a plus 4, it's now a minus 4. But because there were 3 x's, you divide your answer by 3. And you don't need to actually work out what minus 4 divided by 3 is. Just write it as a fraction like that. All right? You have a go then with these ones. 3 similar questions. I'm giving you just 1 minute for these. Off you go. Okay, should we see how we've done? Let's go over the top 2 first. So we should have x equals minus 2 or x equals positive 7. Just flip the signs. Exactly the same in the second one. X equals plus or minus 5. You can write it in one go like that. We've got the minus 5 from the first bracket, a plus 5 from the second. Flip the signs. Our second one is the slightly more, or our last one is the slightly more challenging one. We've got x equals, now it's going to be a positive 3, but it's going to be over 2 because there were 2 x's. And with our second bracket, we're going to have x equals negative 1, but it's going to be over 4 because there were 4 x's. So x equals 3 over 2 or x equals minus 1 over 4. Alright, I hope that's helped with those simple ones there. And you'll have noticed, remember, that all of those questions, the equation equals 0. And that's the only way we can do that. So, last little bit, some of them don't always equal 0. Now look at this first one here. It does equal 0, but it's not in nice brackets. So sometimes we have to set it up into the brackets ourselves. And we can do this easy enough. We've done this one, I think, twice already in this session. So we should know that that is x plus 3 and x plus 2 equals 0. It's just tying together the factorising, which we learned at the beginning of the session, and now our solving. So x equals minus 3 or x equals minus 2. Okay, so we're just doing that step first. Factorise, then solve. Who can spot what type of question this second one is? Can we spot there? It looks like it might be difference of two squares. But remember, it had to have that negative sign in. So let's make it. Let's subtract this 25 from both sides. We end up with 4a squared minus 25 equals 0. Now we've got difference of two squares which we can factorise. 2a plus 5, 2a minus 5 equaling 0. And now we can solve both of those brackets. A equals minus 5 over 2, because we've changed the sign and it's divided by 2, or A equals a positive 5 over 2. All right with that? And in our third case, this one is one of our more complex ones, 2x squared plus 9x equals minus 4. The first problem you should see is that it equals minus 4 and we want it to equal 0. So we are going to have to add 4 to both sides. So on the left hand side I now get 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 equals, and on the right hand side, 0. Minus 4 plus 4 is 0. Now this looks like a quadratic we can solve. We actually solved this one earlier on, so I'm not going to go through it again, but our answer was 2x plus 1 and x plus 4. So that's when we factorised it like we did earlier. You'd have to do that from scratch if this was just an exam question on its own. Now, because it equals 0 and it's in our nice brackets, we can solve. The first bracket gives us minus 1 over 2. The second bracket gives us minus 4. All right, you'll go at some of these rearranging. They're all in the same sort of method if you want to look back at my example. And these are the last questions we're going to do with you today, so make it a good one. Off you go. Do look back at your previous question if you've got your handouts for that last one. Don't try and do it from scratch if you don't have time. But if you do, it's always good practice. Right, let's go through them together. So this first one, when we factorise it, we get x minus 8 and x plus 6 equals 0. Change the signs, that means x equals 8 or x equals minus 6. All right? The next one, if we can spot, that's difference of two squares if we rearrange it. So subtract 9 from both sides. We end up with x squared minus 9 equals 0. Now we can factorise into x plus 3, x minus 3. Because it equals 0, we can now solve by just flipping the sign. So x equals minus 3 or x equals positive 3. All right with that one? Now this bottom question was one we've done before, so I'm just going to get our factorised answer from before. But before we do that, sorry, you've got to spot at the end here, it equals 7. And we don't want it to equal 7, we want it to equal 0. So we have got to first take away 7 from both sides. Not sure why my pen is flashing about so much. Right, so here we are, 3x squared minus 14x plus 15, because we subtracted 7 from both sides, equals 0. When you factorise that, I'm not going to do the whole method, just getting my answer from earlier. Oh, sorry, that's a negative 5 and an x minus 3 equals 0. So that gives us x equals positive 5 over 3, or x just equals positive 3 as your final answer. Okay, so 5 over 3 or positive 3. Right, apologies about that. You should be able to see this slide now. I'm not going to give you time to go through these now with me live talking through them, but you'll be able to pause them in your own time after this video has ended to have a go. These are slightly more challenging questions. The first left-hand side starts off mainly because you've got to try and work out what the question means. It's not set up as easily as I've given it to you, broken down. Then they get slightly more challenging. We've got functions coming in question 7, which you may or may not have learnt yet. And on the right there, you've got an extension question to do with shape and area. So have a go at those questions. I am going to put the answers on the screen now. So if you don't want to see them, just turn away for a minute. But I want to show you afterwards about the next session I'm going to do, so do hang on. So the answers, if you are pausing this later and want to have a look, they're coming up right now. So those are the answers, questions 1 to 7. Pause it if you want to mark your work. And moving on, these are the answers for that extension question, the shape one. Okay, so pause it if you want to answer your work. If at any point you've got a question over that, even if it's after the session has ended, please just comment on the video on either Facebook or YouTube and I'll get back to you and try to explain it as best as I can. Right, the next session is going to be this Wednesday, so that's Wednesday the 3rd at 5 PM, and we are going to be continuing with some of the quadratic equations, so getting slightly more challenging, doing some interesting stuff with them. Now we've recapped the basics. It will hopefully be the same hosted on YouTube and Facebook, but it depends how today's gone, whether it's worked out all right. You can find more practice questions on quadratics on Corbett Maths by looking at videos 118, 119, 120, 266 and 267. There's a link to that on my website, and you can download Wednesday's handouts from my website in advance. They'll hopefully be ready by Tuesday at the latest. Alright, thanks for watching. Give it a quick like and a share if you can to get the word out there, because I'd like to try and help as many Year 10s as possible who are maybe feeling slightly anxious about returning to school. Fab. Well done today.